Hi, Clermont. I'm Alison Strange. I'm running for City Council, Seat 1. I want to talk to you today about taxes and millage. Now, before I get to talking, let's define these terms because I see a lot of misunderstanding or confusion, not only on social media, but in talking to people about what exactly is the millage and how exactly does it affect our taxes. So, when we talk about increasing or decreasing the millage, are we also talking about increasing or decreasing taxes? And the answer is that depends. So let's get right into it. Florida law defines the millage, or the Florida Department of Revenue defines the millage as a tax rate defined by the dollars assessed per each $1,000 of value. So 1 mil is $1 per $1,000 of assessed value. So what exactly does that mean? So whatever the value of your home is, and there's an example here, you can pull this from the Florida Department of Revenue. I didn't make this one up. They give some examples of how millage rate affects your tax bill. And this flyer, which is really handy, actually includes an explanation of how the Save Our Homes exemption applies. And so this is really helpful if you don't understand millage to take a look at this. But if you think of the millage rate as a shortcut for us to identify what our taxes are, it explains it's a tool for defining the tax rate, but it's not taxes and it's not, it's just the rate that the taxes are applied. So if that's not confusing enough, let's take a look at what the DR 420 is. So Florida statutes say that by July 1st of each year, the property appraiser will look at all the properties in Clermont, figure out what they're all worth, and then identify what the tax rate, the millage rate, should be if the tax amount is the same from one year to the next year. That rate is defined as the rolled back rate. So basically what happens is if this year your property is worth $100,000 and next year your property goes up by 10%, then the property appraiser says, well, last year you paid $5,000. And so, or $500 in that case, the millage would be $500. And so if the city is going to charge you the same tax, meaning $500, then with your assessed value now being $110,000, if they were still assess you the 5 mils, then you would be paying $550. So there is a rolled back rate established. So instead of adopting a 5 mil, what we would do is lower the millage so that your taxes stay the same, so that you keep paying the same $500 in taxes. That is the rolled back rate. Now, this gets even more fun and complicated. Anytime your lawyer or your bookkeeper or your accountant says this is fun, watch out, because it means it's really exciting for them, which means there's a lot to learn. So we have the rolled back rate. So when we say we've reduced the millage, that doesn't mean we've rolled back the millage. It just means we've reduced the millage. In an economy where the property values are increasing, if you keep the millage the same, for example, if you have a $100,000 home and then it's worth $110,000, if you keep the millage the same, you've actually increased taxes by 10%. So if you lower the millage by 5%, you've still increased taxes by 5%. So by saying that we've increased, well, definitely if you increase the millage in a market where the property values go up, you're increasing taxes. But in a market where the property values go up, even if you reduce the millage, but you don't go all the way to the rollback rate, you're still increasing taxes. So let me show you. So by July 1st of each year, each city is provided with what's called a form DR 420. This is sent from the property appraiser to the city, to the tax collector, and to the Department of Revenue. And this starts the process as defined by the statute. And this statute, 200.065, goes into all the steps that the city has to take to adopt a budget and assign a millage rate. So from the beginning, the property appraiser says, okay, the current year rollback rate, here we go, I have to highlight it, on line 2 is 4.6236. So last year, our millage rate was 5.06. This year, if the city is going to collect the same amount in taxes, we need to roll back the millage to 4.6236. Okay. Ignore this number for now. It's not relevant to the subject of 2025. So if we keep scrolling, we can see the rollback rate. Here it is again, 4.6236. This is the rollback rate. Here's a number that has come up in some conversation, 4.8867. So what is this? So this is the majority vote maximum millage rate allowed for fiscal year 2025. So if 3 out of 5 of our council members are going to pass a millage rate or a budget that requires a millage rate, it has to be at 4.8867. So what is this number? This number is the rollback rate multiplied by 1.0569. Well, what's 1.0569? We come down to the instructions on this form, and it shows that line 12 is determined by the Department of Revenue, and it is based on the change of per capita Florida personal income. Okay, so according to the Department of Revenue, Floridians, all Floridians, not just Clermontians, not Lake County, all Floridians have had an increase in income of 5.69%. So the Florida Department of Revenue says that we are allowed to assess our citizens the rollback rate, meaning keep our taxes the same, times 5.69%. It's kind of like a cost of living adjustment. The potential folly here is, do we think that Clermont has made the same, more or less than the average citizen in Florida? I don't know. That's the law. I accept it. So at 4.8867, majority vote can pass that. That's saying we're keeping taxes the same and we're adding 6%, because Floridians made 6% more, 5.69 last year. So that's what Florida law says we can do. Now, if the city was so inclined to, if our if our represented elected officials voted to increase the millage to 5.37, it would take a 2/3 majority vote. They haven't said 5.37, they've said 5.06, which is the same rate as we had last year. So far, that's what was published back in July. Now, I was at the last budget hearing, and the city council voted for a maximum rate of 4.95, which is still above the rollback rate with the cost of living adjustment. I'm just going to call it the cost of living adjustment. So it's still above the 4.8867. So on Monday, the city council is going to vote whether to roll back our taxes or roll back the millage so that our taxes stay the same, and they can go below. So, they can actually reduce it, or whether to go to the rollback rate plus the cost of living adjustment, or to stick now to 4.95 because this number is lower than 5.06. It's not a reduction in taxes. So let me show you how this is supposed to have been advertised, because from what I've seen, it's not how it's been advertised. According to the statute, the city is supposed to have a certain number of meetings. So the first budget meeting here is this subsection C. And it talks about how the hearing is supposed to be held. But it says that prior to the conclusion of the hearing, the governing body will amend the tentative budget as it sees fit, which at the last hearing, they basically said, let's reduce the budget by $800,000. Adopt the amended tentative budget, recompute its proposed millage rate, and publicly announce the percent, if any, by which the recomputed proposed millage rate exceeds the rolled back rate. That was not done. And this may be why. Because that percentage shall be, that's not an option, it's mandatory, shall be characterized as the percentage increase in property taxes tentatively adopted by the governing body. Florida law requires our city to communicate to us that they are in fact increasing taxes and by what percentage. I'm going to show you the notice. Oops, wrong one. Oh, did I get rid of it? I did get rid of it. Sorry. Let me do this. Sorry about that. Let me move my circle here. All right, here's the legal ad. This is what was published. Now it does say notice of proposed tax increase, so that's good. It does give notice to the public that the city council is proposing to increase taxes. It does not identify the rate, the millage rate. It does not identify the percentage that the taxes are being increased. So you do the math. The actual property tax levy for last year was $24.687 million. This year's proposed property tax levy is $28.196 million. Now, I'll do the math. 24,685,917 times 1.056, was it 9? I think might have been 7. It's 26 million, almost 26.1 million. But we're not looking at 26.1 million. We're looking at 28.196. So Florida statutes say, and Florida law says, last year's taxes plus a reasonable cost of living adjustment is 26.1 million. And we're looking at 28.2 million. So that's where we're at right now. And that's what's happening on Monday, is the city council is deciding whether to increase our taxes by lowering the millage to 4.95 or to keep our taxes the same, or to reduce our taxes, or to keep our taxes the same with a cost of living adjustment. So those are the choices on Monday. This is not my opinion. This is Florida law. These are the definitions. And I want you all to have a clear picture of that. The other thing I want you to have a clear picture of is this. When I emailed the tax collector's office and said, how does the council know what the tax is in line 24 of DR 420? Are the total year current proposed taxes equal to or less than the total taxes at the maximum millage rate? Yes. Okay. Sorry, line 24. Total taxes at the maximum millage rate, 2.822612. This is total taxes. In other words, what's our budget? What's our ad valorem tax budget going to be? When I emailed the tax collector and I said, how does the council know what the rates are going to be at lines 11 and 13? How did they know this? Because that was one of the questions at the meeting was if Chandra Myers asked, if we roll back the millage, what's the tax rate? Or what's the taxes, not the rate, but the taxes if we roll back the rate? What are the taxes at 4.9? What are the taxes at, how do we know what the taxes are? And the answers were vague. But to some extent, we kind of had an idea of what it would be if we rolled back the taxes. So the representative from the tax collector's office sent me a form, which I'll show you here, that shows what the total tax would be at each rate. So at 4.6236, the total tax would be $26.3 million. At 4.715, the total tax would be 27.066, which was 4.751 was last year's fiscal year 24's adjusted cost of living adjusted rate. And then you can see the numbers. Okay. Here's what's interesting. According to our proposed budget, this is fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget. We look up here at taxes. That's not what you want to look at. You want to look at the ad valorem taxes. This is what we're talking about, millage rate and taxes. Let's define the terms. Ad valorem tax rate, proposed budget, fiscal year 24-25. According to the city manager's recommendation, the proposed ad valorem taxes that we need to collect are $27.669 million. I want to bring you back here. 27.669 is more than 4.7517, but it's less than 4.88. By way of reminder, 4.88 is the rate for the rollback plus cost of living. So, based on what's available in public record, if the city manager is saying our taxes should be 27.669, that would be consistent with what the property appraiser says we should be assessed based on last year's taxes plus cost of living adjustment. If we think that our budget has been properly managed and that everybody is, we're efficient. So in order to go above that, what we're saying is we need to increase taxes. If we go above 4.88, we are saying we need to increase taxes. What I don't like seeing is our incumbents say things like, we're not increasing taxes. We are increasing taxes. Rolling back the millage is not increasing taxes. If we reduce the millage at anything above 4.6, we are increasing taxes. We might justify it by saying we're increasing taxes for a cost of living adjustment. And that sounds reasonable. But it is not accurate to say that we're reducing the millage and therefore we are reducing taxes. We're not. It's not what's happening. So this is millage as it applies to taxes. I've shown you, I didn't make any of this up. This came from Florida Department of Revenue. This is the rate. These are the rates that were given to the city back in July on what we should be looking at. These are the rates that were given to me when I requested a simple follow-up of, what are the rates? It took two emails to ask the question. I'm concerned that the notice is not clear by Florida law. I'm not the city attorney. That's up to Dan. He can say whether they've done it correctly. Certainly you can figure it out. Maybe that's acceptable. I'm a firm believer that when it comes to being taxed, we should be fully transparent about what we are doing. And I think that complying with Florida law by publishing the percentage of increase, publicly announce the percent that exceeds the rollback rate, characterized as a percentage increase in property taxes. I think that that's important. So if anybody is telling you that at 4.95, we are not increasing the property taxes, that statement is inconsistent with the notice of the proposed tax increase and Florida law and fact. So hopefully this has been helpful. It's not my intention to cause divide. I don't want to cause divide. I just want to be accountable to one another, that we use words that are legally proper and appropriate, and that we are not misleading anybody by either our own lack of understanding, which is always my assumption that we don't understand. Anytime somebody says something that is factually or legally inaccurate, unless you're a lawyer, how could you know this stuff, right? So anytime someone says something that is just incorrect, my goal is to educate if I have the information. If I don't have the information, my goal is to educate myself. So I didn't fully understand the millage and the taxes. I had a pretty good handle on it, but I didn't have a complete handle on it. Talked to the property appraiser. I talked to the tax collector. I did my own research, and this is what was provided to me and that I found in my research. So I just want to remind everybody that for purposes of Monday night, the proposed budget shows ad valorem taxes of $27.669 million, which, according to the tax collector and property appraiser's office, $27.669 million is less than 4.88, which is less than the rollback rate with the cost of living adjustment. So hopefully this is helpful. Please feel free to follow me on my Facebook page, which is Alison Strange for Clermont City Council Seat 1. You can ask me any questions there. I take private messages. You can email me at strangeforclermont@gmail.com. I'm not as quick on that one as I am Facebook, but I will get back to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, I'm Alison Strange for Clermont City Council, Seat 1.